last year for Hawaii?
You did, and I didn't. I just didn't want to either encourage that or embrace it or not embrace it because there's room for change.
Look at you, Mr. Sensitivity. Oh my gosh. Well, I hope that's an endorsement of how much fun we had all the years.
It's so, yeah.
And
it's
you
so
were so
great.
amazing. That thing you did this year, that little bit, was that, yeah.
I love the outdoor show.
I hated it.
Yeah.
That's one reason. It's not,
I
outdoor and
thought-
comedy is not my thing.
I sensed that, especially once you wrote the thing. But it was there was something. You knew that most of the crowd was hip and getting it all, and really, but they were looking for what each other was going to do, a little bit.
You know what? It's so funny because the first 10 minutes of my act is about the subject you and I are inevitably going to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, which is health in general and vaccines and COVID and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in Maui, it went over huge. And in Honolulu, it was much more of your crowd.
Yes, I felt that, but
MSNBC watching, indoctrinated.
But you also transcend that. So they are looking at it and they're saying, this is the smart version of the comedy against us.
Right.
I
That's
think
great.
they were patiently waited that part out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then it got great.
And that's the issue I have with liberals in general these days, and have for some years, is, and not just on that issue, but it's emblematic of, just that attitude of, we will not be challenged on things we don't already believe. Now, of course, the right does this absolutely also. And so we'll just wait it out. There's no more open mind.
Nobody has
an
podcast now, or are we just talking?
Yes.
But we are in.
And we're done.
I saw the scissors. I wondered if you were a moil.
No, this is for gets who fuck up. What's it? No, yes, I love that you asked that. Everybody asks that. Not everybody, but even seasoned pros who don't realize there's cameras all around. And I want it to be like we're, nobody else in the room. Just us doing what you've been in this room many times. You gave me an amazing birthday tribute here when I was 60.
That's a long time.
I can't believe. I was just thinking, I was talking about reading about the new James Bond. I was thinking, you could have been James Bond.
I think it takes a different architecture of a face to be James Bond.
Not when you were 40. Not now. I'm not saying you play James Bond now. No.
Yeah, I wouldn't have looked like the James Bond I wanted to see.
You got to do more comedy now.
Well, the fun thing about it is, on a serious note about that, I have never been resistant to comedy.
No, you started out as the guy, the Macaulay.
But it's interesting because there becomes a perception, and I got offered very few comedies.
You going to do the Three Stooges?
Well, there was a moment I was considering that. Yeah.
My mouth was watering for that one.
Yeah, it was a different approach than the one they ultimately took. It was a different cast.
Yeah.
And I thought, well.
And you were Larry?
Yeah, and Jim Carrey was going to do Moe at the time, and those guys have stumbled on some fantastic comedy at times. It's outrageous at times, and so I thought that would be.
Well, but I remember about it was thinking, because even before I knew you, I was an admirer of your acting skills, and to pick Larry.
Well, I didn't get to pick.
But even to take on Larry,
yeah.
Because he was the one stooge that had no. A Larry episode was,
It was also a hairdo that was going to make me more unpopular than already I sometimes am during the period of shooting.
Curly Moe, yes, I see those as rich, syrupy parts.
Yeah.
But Larry.
I think they were smart. I think they were if I was going to do it, I think it was Larry.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
let's go right to this thing on vaccination.
let's do it.
So here's what we've had conversations about it, and I've heard you in conversation with others, and then of course, publicly. Let's agree that neither of us are scientists or doctors.
Correct.
Okay. So one is each of us are, as we grow through life, become observers of certain things. And there are more what become those that we take the kind of risk with. So you say, okay, I trust this attitude more than I do this one. And my feeling about vaccination was always that knowing that there's a statistical possibility on either side, more than a little one on either side, that this could do more harm than good to a human body. We knew that while there was 20 years of development of the mRNA technology, and I shouldn't even say those letters, because if you ask me to put on the board the way the cell structures of the spike proteins work, I might have had retention for 2 seconds of that, 2 years ago.
We're not scientists.
Right. So what happens is that you have, what I observed was that the scientists who I was going to commit to, because I felt it was a decisive time, and I still feel that it was a decisive time at best, I believed them in ways that those who were considered on the fringes, I didn't believe, not because they were on the fringes, not because they were being silenced or not given enough voice, but as I explored them, I, as an actor who have a level of trained observation, I like to believe, I saw people who were identity seeking in terms of their dissident position on it.
Then you weren't reading the right people.
No, but I was reading a lot of people, and the key here, we talked about this. Just going to overwhelm you for a second. The key here, we had talked about this, is that we have independence and interdependence reality as a country and as humankind. So every time this conversation is had, one forgets one significant element of it. Whether that one significant element was, what are our hospital resources? And no matter what it does or doesn't do to our body, does it make us safer to the people who are going to be more significantly affected?
I mean, I wouldn't argue with almost any of these points. You just leave out the other half, a lot. The people on the fringes, they're less and less on the fringe. And what was on the fringe at the time sometimes is not the fringe anymore. Where was the fringe on masks? At first it was don't bother, which I understood because masks are for surgeons, and they, generally the virus is like many, many times smaller than the smallest hole in the mask. And at first they said, just wear anything, just put an old bandana on your face. Yeah. Okay. So, and then the vaccine will prevent you getting it, but it doesn't, and prevent you giving it, and it doesn't. I mean, these are significant. I understand that.
But I would say there's another half to that, which is that the N95 mask was in such short supply and in such need in the hospitals that the original public health message was, let's protect our frontliners. And let's get these N95s
There's even a study now that doubts the N95. But I'm sure it's better than the other one. Or, but again, there's a whole other school of thought about fighting things with your natural immune system. Not all of them. But it should be my choice whether I fight it in your manner or the way it's a medical decision. I find it incredibly arrogant to put this kind of coercion on people about what goes on in their own bodies, especially since all of our bodies are different or independent. If I went to a doctor tomorrow and he didn't ask to know my history and study it before he advised me to do anything, I would think that doctor is an idiot. And by the way, there are many doctors who are idiots. and ones who you call the fringe, who are actually more mainstream now, and always were mainstream, but they were cowed into silence, so it didn't seem like there was a lot. But actually 16,000 doctors and scientists signed something called the Barrington Letter. Have you heard about that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, they all dissented with the basic ways we were handling this.
16,000 is not enough for me. And when I go back
it's
to...
significant. And that's just who signed.
But then you have another philosophical question. A lot of this stuff is going to prove itself in one direction or another over a lot of time. I'm always willing to be wrong on any issue. But there are moments where I believe, and I think we've all faced these moments, whether as individuals or as a society, where there has to be an immediate reaction. When we talk about public health, and we talk about leadership in public health, if we get hit by the equivalent of Ebola, which melts our vital organs,
then I'll fight you for the vaccine.
My point is, we didn't know all of what this was. But it was a test of two things. It was a test of how fast could science move in making adjustments in the technology that would make us safer. And that's an argument we can have. And how, at first I remember when it was 5,000 dead Americans. And one thought, oh my God. But we got to well over 1 million. And that's when something that you and I both know mostly affected elderly people, people with obesity, people with other issues, diabetes.
Those are the big two.
Right. But we didn't know if that strain may ultimately become something much more virulent. And so at some point, leadership
although viruses usually don't, although they usually become less virulent.
They usually become less virulent, that's right. But can you say you knew?
Okay,
I didn't know.
these are all, none of these choices are 99 to 1. They're all like 60-40 choices. But, we come down differently on these matters of medical autonomy and also like how bad this pathogen was. Free speech. I mean, it's so funny to find...
Let me set myself up for a fall, because I think that you have an intellect that operates in most ways on a higher level than mine. However, therefore, wait, no, but let me just say, because humor, I think, is the only genius communication. And it's really, more than anything, the only thing that's going to get us to talk to each other again as a country, as a culture. It's the thing that we all look to for our sanity. When I saw you in Hawaii doing the vaccine skepticism section of your show, well, I was very open to the humor of it. But having said that, I would say, where skepticism is this? Because you're talking about the independence of your body.
But I'm sorry.
I know my body. I'm Djokovic, and I know my body so well. Or I'm Laird Hamilton. I know my body so well. I believe in herd immunity, and so on and so forth.
Believe in herd immunity. I thought it.
Now, what if I
think it just is a thing? I don't think you can believe in it.
But there are
just like angles, natural immunity.
No, but there are angles with which herd immunity attacks on public health approaches to that.
Yes, it's a complicated subject, but it's a real thing. You can't believe in it or not. It just is, as is natural immunity.
So one knows their own body. What if one knows their own driving skills and therefore says, I should be allowed to drive 125 miles an hour through a small town with my lights off?
It's a terrible analogy.
Except for those who died of COVID-19.
Oh, for fuck's sake. That's a complicated amalgam of reasons why people died. They didn't really make a big distinction between died with COVID or died from COVID.
I understand that.
I'm sorry, but in my worldview, which is a lot of people's worldviews, and it's not just 16,000, it's not a fringe, believe in much more terrain theory, which means it's not about the pathogen so much, although of course there are those that are virulent to everyone. It's about the terrain that the pathogen is invading. And if that terrain is not healthy, yes, you will die. We're hearing a lot about long COVID. I'm not a doctor, you're right. And by the way, just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you can't be a fucking idiot.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's why they say get a second opinion. But
But that's okay. I think that's
No,
good.
no.
No, you're talking about what I wanted to say. This will get you back on track.
Oh.
Define fringe.
5%. 5 to 10% is fringe, I would say. I don't know if this is true now. Maybe it's more, but like, I would say woke people I still think they're actually a fringe. I mean, like most of the people, like 80% of the tweets are from like 10% of the people who tweet, Okay. That's a fringe, but fringes can be very powerful.
But fringe has a kind of demeaning connotation.
Which is why I don't like it when you used it, because it doesn't accurately describe.
Let me tell you what I mean by fringe then.
Okay.
Fringe can be an absence of consciousness of interdependence. Fringe can be those who are misinformed or those who, for reasons beyond their control.
Well,
I think, for example, it is a fringe that does not have a world perspective in terms of having traveled. Sometimes for socioeconomic reasons, others for a lack of curiosity. So you only have about 28% of Americans who have a fucking passport.
What does that have to do?
Well, you've traveled the world. Does it not give you a different view, a larger view of perspective?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of the people who were saying that we shouldn't allow other points of view on Twitter and so forth were against points of view that were used in European countries. Like, Sweden did better, they're saying, than any other European country, even Norway, and they followed less stringent guidelines than we did by far. They kept the schools open, they weren't masking children. They didn't buy...
They initially isolated the elderly.
Yes, exactly, which is what you should do.
And it ended up in calamity. Now,
in Sweden, it did not. This just came out.
It did. Should I get my phone out and Google it?
No. No. I'm sure you...
But it's a good example of, look, again, circling back to the beginning, is that because I have so much respect for you, that every time I hear you talk about it, I do question my own position.
Good. And that's why we're here.
And that's what I think we do need more of, is that, and we talk, I have great friends who are militantly on the other side of the political spectrum. And I've been able to keep those friendships and nurture them to a kind of higher level during this chaotic time, let's say the Trump time, let's say since 2016, where I just made a decision that, if that 1% chance that I'm wrong is the reality, I want to keep challenging it.
Well, I hate to break it to you, and I love you too, and I have a tremendous respect for your intellect and everything, but there's a much greater chance of 1% that you're wrong. Okay? You seem to think that because it seems, and I'm not even going to admit that it is the truth, but it seems that a majority of voices are with your side. No one thought Hillary Clinton could win because, the poll said it was like 80% chance. Well, it's still 20% chance that it wasn't going to be Trump. Or it wasn't going to be Hillary. And that's what happened. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it's even more with medical. You use the term misinformation. Whose misinformation? The misinformation that I got from the United States government? I seem to remember 6 months when we were just all leaving our packages outside and rubbing it like it was a fucking stool sample or something. The natural immunity. You talk about other countries. Other countries have much more faith in natural immunity, which this country did up until this disease. Why are these opinions, which are shared by many millions of people, both laymen, who, by the way, a smart layman can know more than someone who, yes, did go to school. You could have graduated medical school in 1972 and not learned a thing since. Mm-hmm. There's no law that you have to keep up.
And could have learned a lot of wrong-minded things along the way.
Right. And I think we were told a lot of wrong-minded.
Yeah, but it goes to a bigger question, because I'm looking at this guy over your shoulder. in terms of leadership, in terms of governance, in terms of media communication, what do we do next time where there is a threat?
First of all,
and we've got to get on the same team about something that nobody can know completely.
First of all, have the guts to tell the American people there's something bad going around. Here's what you can do. Here's how you can protect yourself. Don't stay home day drinking and overeating. That's going to have the reverse effect. The first thing I said in March of 2020, our last show on the air, I said...
You just picked two things that I did during COVID.
I said, sugar, stress, sleep. Stop eating sugar. Stress, don't stress about it more than we have to. Get sleep. And of course, people got unhealthier. So when you say 1 million Americans, yes, of course, but it's such a blinkered way of looking at health, because there are so many factors that go into whether you're healthy or not, or whether you are going to get felled by that disease. Millions of people never even knew they had it. Mm-hmm. Everyone has had it by now. It's a virus. It's everywhere. You're soaking in it. We're breathing it right now. Okay, so... Oh, now I forgot.
That's okay, but what I can say is, for whatever reason, I never had it.
I know that was one of my points.
I never had it. And I was, working in the space. And
you were so exposed to it. You didn't have it because you've spent your life swimming through sewage in Bolivia or something to free a poet or some shit. I always say, Sean Penn, of all the celebrities, this guy walks, you know this, but this is you. This guy walks the walk. There's so much talk and so brave. And you're the one guy who actually...
Here's what we agree on in terms of this public health thing. I think we're completely in sync. When you and I asked you about what does leadership look like in, when the next pandemic comes, and I know you would like to say that wasn't the pandemic, but
it's a pandemic. I get it.
When a pandemic comes, which scientists at large are telling us it will. Having gone through this exercise, yes, I wish that leadership had coalesced an opinion which was, we don't know. To begin with, we don't know. Our best understanding of it as scientists today is this. Our demand on, when it came to things like mandating, whether it was masking or distancing or testing or vaccination, that can be an endless conversation just about COVID, but as a future conversation about how we are going to be a team. We've studied the other team's movements. The other team being the virus.
Okay.
When a virus approaches, how do we function as a team? And I would just argue that whatever is the consensus science of the time, which could be wrong, we give it 10 weeks. And we find ways, in some cases that will require subsidies for people, not endless unemployment benefits and all of this kind of crazy. And it will say, okay, what we know is we know how to test for this, but we don't have enough fucking Q-tips to put up people's noses. So you have defense production. And you have leadership, and we should know, as the American people, the world, what will be our joint defense when we get to the next, I don't know.
Well, it's not a fucking Q-tip up my nose. I've had enough Q-tips up my nose. And I'm sorry, I don't want any more. Yes, I want my freedom in my nose. Mm-hmm. And it's unnecessary. You think it's still necessary? I got tested this week, so I could do real time on Friday.
I think
I'm positive
that one of the midline things that we could consider is that there should be very affordable home tests for several things.
No, I don't want to do that either. I've had to do that for quite...
I said available. I didn't say I'm shoving it in your mailbox and up your nose.
Okay, thank you, but a lot of things turn into mandatory quickly.
Right, but when people have the opportunity, for example, have you ever done this ancestry thing, this 23andMe thing or whatever?
Yes, I'm a Zulu warrior.
I knew that. So I think that if it's available and easy, people's curiosity will win the day. I think more people will say, I feel like I have the flu. I've got the test
yes.
here. I'm going to do
okay, if you feel sick, sure, that's different. That's not what they're doing. It's like if you want to go to a party, you have to it's like, for fuck's sake, we're past this. Trust your immune system. You're going to have to, at some point in life, develop your immune system. And if you can't, yes, you should be protected.
Yeah, but understand, I agree with you. I felt very early on that the horse got out of the gate before the buzzer. And there were those of us that said, okay, we're going to invest in this sense of how to attack it. But it was very clear, just like, for example, in a conflict zone. In Baghdad, 2003, and I had been there in 2002 and 2003.
Who saw it?
Bad question. Ours.
Yes.
But in that situation, you saw very early after the shock and awe campaign, of course, people, like would be here, are hiding in whatever they can call a bomb shelter. I've just seen it, the same thing in Ukraine. Originally, that's what happens. We get that as human beings. We want to protect our children, this is, at a certain point, this is part of our life and you got to learn how to dance with it. And the shops begin to open in war zones, in active war zones. We have still not had in leadership or in media communication a sensitization to this so that we recognize, I said 10 weeks, let's call it 3. If consensus science, which is not perfect, gives us a red light warning, we should say, okay, we'll do this for this long, but there's a mental health issue that comes on after that.
We've been doing consensus science. Mm-hmm. And, it's funny because the country now has revolted against some of this stuff, almost like they did during Prohibition, when they said, we just don't believe in these policies. There are policies with masking and stuff, and, of course, you notice we still make the help wear the mask. Because the germs know who the celebrities are, wherever you go. Because you mentioned Iraq and Ukraine, and I know, if it was one of those old movies where they have the stamps on the luggage, yours would have like so many stamps on it. Like, what is it when you're like, you seem to be attracted to the fire.
Maybe. I think there was a very famous French volcanologist. Volcano study of volcanoes.
Of course.
Named Maurice Kraft.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a documentary on he and his wife because they were a team. And he struggled a lot with his feelings about mankind, about human beings. And he felt that the more time he spent with volcanoes, the more he loved humankind.
Oh.
Now, I've tried to deep dive from ego to adrenaline junkie to, I've heard all the criticisms that are, I'm grandstanding. You got to consider it all.
Right.
And I think the one that hit me the most was that there was something in Ukraine in particular where everything that we were wired to believe was exceptional about America, I realized I'd never smelled it in the air. And then I got to Ukraine and I smelled exactly that dream. Wow. And with a resilience that's extraordinary. And by the way, if you're being just pragmatic and recognizing the obstacles, an obstacle is racism. And with Ukraine, you have a Trojan horse who can get through and show that what we share is dreaming, because we will fight harder as a country for white faces. There's no question about that. I've worked in Haiti for 12, 13 years. That country has suffered from its color. And, people of heart have given a lot to it. But never has the...
We gave an awful lot of blood and treasure to save the people of Vietnam from Ho Chi Minh.
Well, see, but this is what I say, but that war is still to me a memory as a child of the stupidity of adults.
Yeah.
And, whether it's John F. Kennedy, our hero,
Right.
or Lyndon Johnson, or Richard Nixon, they were all telling us that communism was going to spread throughout if we let this, and it was not the case. And it was also not the case that it could be won.
Okay, communism was intent on spreading. You can't...
No, I wasn't saying that. I'm
Right,
saying
but
that
you would agree with
Vietnam
that.
was not going to be the
We weren't going to say it,
the
right.
deciding factor.
Well, we don't know because we can't go back in time and rewrite history.
Well, we know because we lost.
I know, but we lost over like 15 years.
That's right.
But if America had not been in Vietnam in the early 60s, or if Kennedy hadn't got shot and say he pulled the troops out and we had no troops there, and Lyndon Johnson's attitude was, well, I'm from Texas. What am I fighting for a yellow man in Asia for? I could see that scenario playing out, or if there was a different president who thought that way at the time. We might not have gone into Vietnam, and all of Indochina probably would have gone communist. I mean, Cambodia did, Laos did, I think, for a time. They would have stopped at Burma, really, and then not India. Yeah, there was a legitimate fear. I'm not saying the Vietnam War was where we should have been, but there was a legitimate fear that Stalin and Mao...
There's also a legitimate lesson, and this is not giving moral equivalency to the struggle of the Vietnamese on either side. But there's a lesson in it. How in the world could we lose that war? How in the world could Russia lose the war in Afghanistan,
right,
followed by us losing the war in Afghanistan?
Right.
So now we have a democratic dreaming, a Western European dreaming country,
right,
occupying all of our values, and
values
we have to
used
understand. And I think the thing that needs to be understood most about Ukraine, because I think it will be the most motivating thing to let it. There are only two ways that Ukraine ends up. One is victory on its own terms,
right,
with or without support, and a lot more dead, and a lot more tragedy. And with the United States going, we gave them one Patriot system. When I was there on one of the trips, when we were going to the east, to the front line, before we went all the way to the front line, we first went to a HIMAR charging station. And it was world news that the United States had given them a HIMAR system. Now, the HIMAR system, unlike the Patriot system, I came to learn, is very quick to train on. And they were extremely effective with it. And this was world news. HIMARS coming in from the US. The biggest border in Europe, we gave them 4.
But we've given them a lot.
Well, I don't know. A lot. We're going to give them more. The question is the expediency.
Okay, you can't say we've been exactly holding back.
No, by
mean,
U.S. standards, we're doing pretty good with
right,
them.
Yeah, I mean, there's only America can't do anything quickly, but I'm guessing just because you say, we're going to give you that, it doesn't have, they have to like put them on trucks, or I don't know what the fuck they have to do, but I know that I don't feel like we're abandoning Ukraine, and we shouldn't abandon Ukraine.
Do you think that this Congress will abandon Ukraine now that we're in a new day?
I think they will try, because it's anything the Democrats want, they will be against. So, Fox News is already kind of pro-Russia, a lot pro-Russia. So,
well, I think that's been going on there's a lot of, and this is not just coming out of me, but out of reading. For 30 years we have been wanting to comfort ourselves that the Russian threat is over for a long time.
No, Mitt Romney was
dead on.
Dead on, and everybody made fun of him when he said the biggest threat is Russia. Mm-hmm. But what do you make of your boyfriend Oliver Stone, like being so down with Putin and Russia. Where does that come from? From an old lefty, went to Vietnam.
Fought in Vietnam. This is what I would say about Oliver Stone, and just to make it a bigger picture, the parts of Oliver Stone that I think should be embraced. Oliver Stone is an iconoclast by nature. One looks into his background, and there's a kind of won't be fooled again anger in there.
Yes.
He owns that. He did put out a public statement separating himself from Putin after the invasion of Ukraine. His fascination with Putin, I think, was to challenge America's sense of exceptionalism. I think that he needs to be...
Just silly way to do it.
That, well, you know, I don't know if it's just silly. I think his provocateurism will ultimately have a productive legacy.
We used to have a contest when we first started Politically Incorrect, called Politically Incorrect or Just Stupid. Because people would do things that were just stupid. And there's a line, you know, I could see how the untrained mind could not get where that line was, but that was the point of the ad. Some things are politically incorrect because they're true, but I'm saying them out loud. And some things are just fucking stupid. Yes, I can get a rise out of you by saying, I think we should legalize cannibalism. It's just stupid.
Yeah, okay.
And backing Putin is just stupid. It's not provocatorial. It's just, just not looking at the reality.
I challenged the phrase backing Putin. I think what
he was licking his ass in documentaries, and I like Oliver Stone. I think he's a genius filmmaker, one of my favorites. The one you did with him, all of them.
Here's what the other side of that is, because I would challenge the idea that Oliver is stupid.
I would didn't say stupid. I said this is stupid. He's not stupid.
But I think that he finds himself quite authentically as a vessel of skepticism, specific to his own patriotism, that he is an American and an individualist. And I don't think that Oliver Stone feels, and I'm not going to argue on his behalf or against him, that here's what he's not. He's not a people pleaser.
Great. Who's he going to back next, Hitler? Hey, I'm provocatoring.
Hitler, great orator.
He was. Well, I mean, you know, the Trump-Hitler analogy, of course, like anything, is an eye roll for many reasons why he doesn't deserve to be compared to Hitler. No, he's not a mass murderer. He doesn't even hate the Jews. But
who are we talking about now?
Trump.
Oh, but he's self-absorbed.
But where the Hitler analogy completely works for me is Hitler in the conference room where they're pushing the things on the map of, you know, and the generals are telling him like rational things, and he is saying, no, I don't care that we need to retreat. All the German soldiers will stay on the line into the west.
That's where Putin is right now.
And that's where, yes, that's where Putin is now. It's the kind of same mentality of Trump. The people around him are like, this guy's nuts, I can't work with him.
Yeah. Well, in one case with Hitler, he was evidently shooting methamphetamine the whole time. And with Trump, he was shooting McDonald's the whole time. but you know, that's a joke, but it's not a joke. You know, this goes back to a conversation you had with your previous guest. We're all learning exponentially now in our lifetime about mental health. We're all thinking about it. And it was not a great big topic of conversation in the 30s and 40s.
Always swept under the rug. Look at the Kennedy kid.
So you would look at the nuances of a character and it would create charisma because it was different. You wouldn't recognize it as sickness. Now we're in a time where some of us believe that we very early on recognize the sickness of Donald Trump. I never didn't see him as a guy 4 blocks off the Vegas Strip selling cars, or a failed magician with this blondie hair and his tan.
Right.
And so you will, again, it goes back to the responsibility of us, which goes back to the public health issue, Not past, not COVID, but future, and how do we prepare trust? How do we demand of leaders an authenticity that says, I don't know sometimes?
Well, that bus has sailed, pal. I don't know what world you're living in, but that's gone. The people, what they know about what they would have to know to make those kind of decisions, that's gone with the wind. So,
Well, again, however, it goes back to consensus science. Consensus science, if you take it off of COVID-19 and you put it onto climate change.
Science lives on the lifeblood is dissent. Science means I say this and then you get to challenge it. This idea that we don't get to challenge it because there's a consensus about something completely new, using a completely new on people vaccine. I understand they've been working on it for a while. Yes, look, I went to your fucking parking lot and got it.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'm very proud of that.
And I think we had dinner that night.
I think we did.
Okay, so look, yes. And trust me, I don't like to argue with my friends about anything. I'm like, why can't you? Because I'm not unreasonable about it. It's not like I'm an anti-vax.
But this is what's important about, forgive me if I advertise you. Here's what's important about you. You have always, you've shown respect to people you've interviewed on your shows. People who I don't want to be in the same room with. They seem so venal to me. And yet, you are no small part of my pursuits that I mentioned earlier, of nurturing certain relationships and finding the common ground and saying, where do we go from here? In fact, I'm considering myself and maybe I shouldn't say his name now, but someone who was in the Trump administration, who was a friend of mine before he was in the administration and during, who I would send texts, please resign now. Resign, California misses you. And he said, trust me, your people want me here. And I understand his position.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's very different, and he's diligent in his religion, and he served a very high office in the administration. And he and I are talking about putting a podcast together.
Oh.
Simply because what I would do is I would get someone I considered my political pundit, somebody who I feel has the skill set to argue with him on the facts beyond mine. And he would get someone as a cultural person, a non-political person, who is on, for the most part, his side of the tracks. And that could create a conversation we need, because if we don't start talking to each other, we're
It's funny you mention that, because Club Random is thinking about forming a network and having an umbrella of other podcasts that we endorse, and maybe you'd like to be part of the Club Random family.
We'll talk offline.
Can we? Let me get you to sign here and here.
Yeah, I had a waiver up there. He came to me, and I don't. But my publicist doesn't know I'm here.
Your publicist gave up years ago. she went out a window like.
She's actually no. She's actually. She's. If I think about what would have been without her, it's a bad story.
I have to tell you, knowing you as long as I do, I have seen you. You became such a mensch. Not that you weren't always. I mean, you were always Superman, flying off to save the world, and sometimes for real, with real people. I could cite chapter and verse. But, there was also this kind of like side of you that reminded me of what Jimmy Van Heusen said about Frank Sinatra. He said, he's one of the most interesting people you'll ever meet, but don't stick your hand in the cage.
Well, there are a lot of women that'll tell you the same.
And that's how I thought of you. And like in the last 10 years, that's just not you. You're just a cuddly teddy bear.
I realize something, and this is whether we're talking about the fucking diabolical pandemic or the wars of this place and the horror that's happening, we got to be 90-10. We got to be. I think we can talk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't believe in this idea of joy without pain. or pain without joy, but at the end of the day, we have an obligation to keep happiness available to people. Like a human obligation, a parental obligation. And that will create its own hope. And for me, at 62 years old, I wake up in the morning and I am determined to live the fuck out of this life.
Good for you.
And I'm gonna be kinder than I was yesterday. I'm gonna hear my kids better than I did yesterday. And you'll have there's no perfection to this science either.
Right.
But there was a turning point for me.
I see. I mean, it's yeah, and it also shows that people are not done living at 50. This country is so ageist, and because most people, because of ill health, let's not get back on that. But when you say 1 million died of COVID, again, health is very complicated. There's so many factors that go into it. Yeah. So many things are going on in your body, genetics, and what you eat, and how many metals are in your body. I could name 1,000 things. Industrial pollution, what you did in your 20s, all these things, how many antibiotics you've had. All these things go into it. So, when anybody says this caused 1 million deaths, that was a factor. It's like when people said, here's an analogy you'll appreciate for this, let me just finish this. When people said Reagan won the Cold War, Reagan didn't win the Cold War any more than COVID killed 1 million people.
Any more than he proved trickle-down works.
It's played its part, but it was a coalition. Kennedy won the going into Vietnam. I know it was a horrible war, I agree, but it did stop the communists in their tracks. Okay, so lots of people won the Cold War. Reagan came in and he played his part in the final episode. I'm going to raise the defense budget, and these people are too poor to keep up with this. He was right about that, and he was right that it was an evil empire. Nothing more evil than communism.
There are 2 points that come to my mind that you're going to finish. Go ahead, finish.
But that's my analogy to COVID. It's like, yeah, COVID did play a significant part, but it's more complicated than that.
Yes, and the 2 things I'll mention are Diane Sawyer. In fact, I forgot the second one, so I'll go to Diane Sawyer. Many years ago, we all loved Diane Sawyer.
Sure. We don't still?
I mean, I still have a crush.
Really?
Diane Sawyer?
Oh, come on. Don't lie.
Absolutely.
Don't lie to me. Oh, stop
But hear this out. She was doing a side job, like, I don't know, she was working for 2 networks or whatever she was doing. She had one thing where she was doing just human interest stuff.
She was a dominatrix.
Yeah. I wish I knew the truth behind it. So she wanted to meet because she wanted to sell me the idea of putting a hidden... This is when I was at the epicenter of the beginning of the paparazzi phenomenon.
Oh, way back.
Yeah. And I was getting problems and arrested and
the epicenter. I love the way you dress up punching photographers.
Well, no, but I mean because of the person I was married to at the time.
I know.
Drew a lot of attention.
You were punching photographers. Come on.
And so we met in New York in a hotel bar. Not room, not on the Weinstein type.
Was she married? Isn't she married?
She was Mike Nichols.
Mike Nichols. Hey.
Brilliant. No, I wasn't going to win.
No.
I didn't try.
He could have won, but just out of respect to his body of work, don't fuck his wife.
But I did accept the meeting.
Just for the graduate.
Because what she wanted to do was ask me to put a hidden camera on in one of those kinds of situation. You were coming out of a restaurant and the paparazzi are hounding to get a kind of... She wanted me to, participate in this story that way.
Wow.
And I was interested in my head of being an actor. I didn't see it coming. I overreacted to certain things. I should have avoided other things. There were all those things that I...
You were young, dumb, and full of cum. We all were. It's
correct.
You don't have to apologize.
Correct. And it wasn't anybody I hit that I regret.
Exactly.
But I regret hitting.
There you go.
You can do both.
Exactly.
So,
and regrets are good.
So we sat there, and very quickly I told her, just as fair play, I don't want to do this. But that was early in the conversation, and we continued the conversation. And she said something that I never forgot, because we were right at the moment that the wall had come down. And I had spent time in West Berlin.
That's the Berlin Wall for you kids.
Yeah. I had spent time in both the West and the East, going through Checkpoint Charlie in the early 80s.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. And this kind of ominous thing that happened when you crossed through Checkpoint Charlie from this alive culture of West Berlin into the East, where it was so repressed, so austere. And she said, it wasn't primarily perestroika. It wasn't Gorbachev. It wasn't Reagan. It wasn't solidarity in Poland. It was black market Beatles records. Levi's 501.
Sure.
It was the human connection of dreaming and having and
freedom. And I mean, there was nothing. I'm sure you've seen that awesome German movie, The Lives of Others. No? Oh, you owe me a blowjob. I just did you such a mitzvah, really.
Again?
Because you're going to love this movie. As a director, I mean, it's so perfect.
Well, my assistant's watching in the other room up there.
No, I'll text you tomorrow.
Say the title
again.
Lives
of Others.
The Lives of Others.
It won the best foreign language movie.
I missed a lot of movies.
You probably gave the award out at the show anyway. But it's about East Germany under Erich Honecker and the Stasi, and where literally every third citizen is spying on the other two. It's just no way, psychologically, it would be almost worse to starve or have some physical thing, what they put these people through. This is one reason why the Russians are so fucked up. The old joke, which is just the beginning of the problem, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. When your whole society is based on something that is not real. And it reminds me of some things the woke do today, where they just declare that it's a new day and there's a revolution and things are completely different now. That's what communism was. People are not selfish anymore. People are always selfish. And the reason why capitalism is a superior system with all its flaws is because it takes advantage of human nature as it is, not as we wish it were to be. I guess what I'm saying is, why are you boyfriends with Castro and Cesar Chavez and every fucking asshole with a beard? And a banana tree out his window.
By that, you mean Hugo Chavez, not Cesar Chavez?
Hugo Chavez.
Okay.
Did I say Cesar?
I have things to say about that. So listen, he knew before he died, not significantly, because I don't claim a significant position. Hugo Chavez. He knew very clearly when he put up the referendum to be able to be president for life and all this kind of stuff. I immediately attacked that. I knew he'd gone off, but what he was originally, and this is not about him, but about the Venezuelans, what he started with in leadership, I think we actually talked about this on one of your other shows at one point, is you literally 80% of the country had no national identity at all. No access to healthcare, no access to education, none, not bad education, no education. And so a person, call him Hugo Chavez, with a movement and a prison time for a coup attempt where he was nearly killed. This is not just some, I hate America, I'm going to control my country like with an iron thumb guy. This is a guy who was himself a dreamer. And he gave people an identity. I was there and not with a minder.
Yeah, but what he didn't give them was food.
What he didn't give them, ultimately, the food crisis happened later under Maduro. And Maduro can be accused of being a dictator, he can be accused of being a bad manager. He's certainly
the inflation rate under your boyfriend Chavez was something like 27,000%.
Let me this say. I will tell you very clearly that Hugo Chavez was my friend. However, your boyfriend, Hugo Chavez, is not an applicable term. He was my friend, and he was in a position, fortunately neither of us have to be in, that he found himself in, that he pursued, any head of state is a bad job to me. You got to decide if I'm going to put U.S. troops on the ground and sacrifice them, or use a drone that maybe kills extra babies.
What I'm saying is that your friend ran a country that had enormous oil revenues that somehow never got to the people, because socialism is the economic program where the money does get to the people, except, of course, when it doesn't.
But that isn't exactly what happened.
Well, what exactly happened to all the oil money?
Well, here's one thing. I can give you cash.
Thank you.
Here's for more.
Okay.
Right?
Or
I can make it cost $1.50 for you to fill your tank. The traffic in I'm not celebrating this as a good policy, but he was giving away oil to the people. They owned it just like he did. That's a fact.
You mean the actual oil? So they all have to fucking sell the oil?
They were working with the Iranians for infrastructure, all kinds of things we can take pause on.
You can't really be defending him from being corrupt with the oil money. I mean, really? Because, and by the way, he's hardly alone in the world. There are many dictatorial countries where the top guy, there's a number, Gabon, I think, is one in Africa, Equatorial Guinea, where you find, and of course they always have a son who's like 28, and he's on Instagram, like doing crazy things with money that they got from stealing the oil revenue from the people.
I'm not going to speak for or against him on his personal corruption in terms of that. Certainly we know that's the case with Putin. But what I can speak for is that and my job there in Venezuela was not as an advocate for Chavez. It was to create the thing that you celebrate, which is skepticism about the way in which the U.S. demonizes.
What do you mean your job there? What was
my
your job?
As an American citizen, I felt it was my job to get across this reality, which was that here, if you have, and South America is strewn with these socialist leaderships that have been intervened upon by American policy and by American intelligence agencies in such an aggressive way. Let me make the point.
I'm not arguing that's it's a true thing.
Way. An aggressive way to the point where we were supporting dictators in Chile who were electrocuting the genitals of people.
And another true thing is that other people in the world have the same thing happen to them and get over it at some point.
But
more quickly. Maybe some people just do things more quickly.
Again, this is not as an apologist for Chavez's policies this way, or his decision-making process. But his decision-making process is one we should study, because when you have no trust, and when you feel, and you have good reason to believe that the U.S. is trying to kill you, because we had done it before with Pinochet,
so he was a bad dude.
He was a bad dude, and we supported him, with Kissinger's money.
Che Guevara was a bad dude.
Well, again, I wasn't there. I think there are things about Che Guevara that are to me quite alluring. He's not Elvis Presley.
He's definitely not.
But I think he's a believer.
But he's on as many T-shirts.
But again, for example, let's go to Giuliani.
Giuliani.
Can we agree that there was 10 minutes where Giuliani represented more leadership than the White House did? When 9/11.
When he did 9/11.
There were 10 minutes where you and I said, "Oh wow." So what I'm saying about Chavez is, his original 10 minutes meant something that we've not been willing to look back on.
Here's what I would say about Giuliani. He did, certainly when he was mayor of New York during that crisis, did a fine job, and I would always give him credit for that. But my question about that is sort of the same thing I've always thought about Captain Sullenberger. Remember who landed the plane? Who again did a fine job. My question, as opposed to what? I hit the Empire State Building, or you tell me that the World Trade Centers have been hit, and I say I've got a meeting in the other room. I mean, no,
two completely different things.
No, they did well, but they were like
no, you can't compare.
Of course, they're different.
No, but let me look. What is the significant difference that makes me move by Sully Sullenberg?
I moved too.
Is that he put in the 10,000 hours on a skill set, not on a vanity set.
Okay.
Not on a blusterous leadership set, and I'm going to take on the mafia because I need your attention.
Your Oscar.
No,
put it on the mantle with the other ones.
He put in the fucking hours. And you hear it.
Yes,
you hear it when
I'm
he's
not-
on the radio,
I am-
and that he did that for us.
Hey, straw man isn't here. I don't hate Sully Sullenberger. I'm saying he did a great thing. He did it great. He like threw a fucking 40-yard pass, zinged it right in there, and they got the score. But you know, it was 4th and 18. What else would he kind of had to do that?
Look, but we would agree.
But like,
we would agree that charisma, arrogance is charisma in America. And when it's in harmony with America at a moment, like Giuliani was, he's going to have a high point despite himself. Sully Sullenberg is going to have a high point no matter what.
I'll be at the Kiva Auditorium in Albuquerque.
Let me read
I'm not
that
even
for you.
ending the show. I'm going to be at the Kiva Auditorium in Albuquerque on January 28th.
And I'll be heckling.
And I'm starting at a new theater, and I've been at the, what's the city with all the gambling?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. I knew.
Gambling and the strippers. Don't forget the strippers.
Right. It was either that or I'd been in Macau the last 6 years. No, I've been at the Mirage and had a great time there. They were so great. But they're changing the showroom, and I'm going to one of their sister hotels, the MGM Grand. This is my first time there at the David Copperfield Theater, February 17th and 18th. And my puppeteer, Sean Penn, will be there working the DJ booth. And February 25th, the Hard Rock in Sacramento, Wheatland, California, actually. I thought I'd just do that, and maybe you wouldn't know. I'm like, he's had enough drinks now. Maybe you wouldn't even notice that I'm doing this.
I'm still not sure the show started.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, Corn. Yeah, I gotta say, comedy is king.
Yep.
I'm telling you, you're at the perfect age now. And, you know, it's interesting the way you see, let me look at De Niro. Like, he went into comedy and he fucking killed it. It's not like you can't still do serious stuff, but like, at a certain point, it's almost like what you were saying before about eliminating the riffraff in your mind. Like, when I watch something, I just want to be entertained.
My feeling is you mentioned Robert De Niro. There's a thing about actors that I think is just always true. It ends up being the truth. Is that the career, the life, the work of an actor, I think of anybody in creatively, comedians as well. It's the body of work gets absorbed no matter what the chronology of it is. In his case, he did very few comedies, and then he, after Midnight Run, everybody said, "Oh, wait a minute." And nobody at that time, nobody thought that America's most gifted dramatic actor was going to become its biggest comedy star. I mean,
No.
it was not, and he had that in there the whole time.
You think that's what started with Midnight Run?
I think Midnight Run is when the money of movies.
Because I love that movie.
Yeah,
Charles
I did too.
Grodin.
I did too.
Here's a sad thing about the times we live in. Almost any movie you mention, not any, but so many, the immediate reaction from someone you're talking to, if it's a private conversation and it can be real, is, oh, they couldn't make that today. If I had a nickel for every fucking time I heard, and I concur, they couldn't make that. I was watching Rain Man the other day. I hadn't seen it. It was so great. Such a great movie.
Listen,
couldn't make
I
it.
use the example all the time of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I can tell you exactly the conversation that would happen.
Right.
If we've got whoever the equivalent star of Jack Nicholson, which by there isn't one.
How's he doing?
I think he's doing fine. He's just, invested in his private life.
I remember you once took me to his house.
Yeah, he's a force of nature and somebody who's always an angel on my shoulder creatively.
No, I know. He thinks of you as like a son. So he's okay.
And he I mean, he has such a facile mind. He's such he's Joycean, and sometimes you have to just go on melody.
That's such a great way to put it, because I never knew what he was talking about.
That's when you have to go melody instead of lyrics.
It's so,
Sometimes the best
but
brains
I used
you
to
just
be
gotta
at
give
dinner
in.
parties at Sue Menger's house.
Yeah.
And, I would sometimes be seated next to Jack or talk to him, and I just kind of went with it because he would laugh and I was like, what the curtain should be washed? What does that mean?
He would sometimes start conversations in the middle, and it's like, well, old Red. He's such and such. And already you're off center because you don't know old Red.
Exactly.
And whenever you shifted and you went melody, you just had a genius.
He's Jack fucking Nicholson. He can be a mental case in his private life if he wants to all day long.
Is I can tell you literally what the conversation would be. Yes, we want to make this film. Yes to the budget, but he can't die in the end.
And also it stars Amy Schumer.
No, I'll take Amy Schumer any day.
I love Amy Schumer.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, she is.
Over a lot of what ends up happening.
If you've never seen a 30-minute long sketch she once did in black and white, it's filmed like a movie, called 12 Angry Men Inside Amy Schumer. Okay, please. Now you owe me two. Now you owe me 2 blowjobs because you are so gonna love this. It's a parody of 12 Angry Men, and then the cast is amazing. I'm surprised you're not in it. All these name people are the angry men, and they're deciding whether she's hot enough to be on TV. And instead of a knife on the table, remember Henry Fonda with the knife? It's a dildo. It's the best sort of parody thing I've ever seen on television.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know her well. I've known her a little bit, and I do have a sense of her, and I've seen her where she had me completely hysterical. I've seen things where I wasn't sure I was following it, but I get a sense, if you got a group of soldiers, culture soldiers together of 10, she'd be in them. She's gotten something special.
And you think we need culture soldiers?
Well,
it's an interesting phrase.
I think we do. I
feel like when I hear, it sounds to me like social justice warrior, and
you know what it is? It's what my version of it. It's Bill Maher. This is things I agree with. This is things I don't agree with. But where I feel I'm getting that I'm being recognized as authentic because this person accepts themselves as authentic. And I look at comedy throughout the COVID period. It was a sanity keeper to the degree I could keep sanity. It was you. It was Dave Chappelle. It was a handful of others Bill Burr. Where you sat there, you say, I'm not even in a world where I have to agree or disagree. I just have to see authenticity.
Well, the 3 of us that you mentioned there, we're all people who call out the woke a lot. So I feel like that is a little bit of a contradiction in you. I feel like you instinctively want to go toward that direction because, you have that tingling feeling in your balls for any sort of thing that's says there's social justice, but at some point that movement veered into authoritarianism. Well, yeah, and that's why the word woke, which originally was fine, alert to injustice, I'm down, always have been, but it became an eye roll because it morphed into something. I got news for
the woke.
Yeah.
You can't find that thought when you're 150 meters from the Russians. When you're seeing the devastation and the vaporization of human beings.
Now I owe you a blowjob.
You are not going to remember all the pronouns.
So that I've been preaching that. See, there,
I know you have.
There we can and you're the one guy who can say it because, again,
we'll see.
You walk the walk. But Sean, you said you're 62?
Mm-hmm.
How long can you, when I think about traveling to Ukraine, the first thing that would cross my mind is peeing. I will not have enough opportunities to be able to do this trip to the front lines.
No, let me tell you, that was an 8-hour drive, and you're not going to piss in the trench.
I can't even.
And I don't know about you, but as an older gentleman, I get bottled up. In fact, I think I'm going to rely on Depends here out.
It's
when I do these trips.
Mrs. Robinson, this conversation is getting a little awkward. No, this really has to. Let's end that part of this discussion there on urinary issues. But what I'm just saying is, like, I really think. I mean, I'm 5 years older than you, but I'm telling you. Yes, am I a million times more of a coward than you are? Yes, I'm Bob Hope. You're Bing Crosby, okay? I'm that's my character. I'm sorry, I'm just not, I just don't like pain or like discomfort if I can avoid it. Shoot me. Anyway, but you walk that walk. So you are almost uniquely qualified to call out the woke. It's almost a responsibility. I quoted you here last week when Bryan Cranston was here, and he was saying he did the Upside, which I thought was a fantastic movie. He's in a wheelchair, and Kevin Hart is the guy who takes care of him. And he said, he got a lot of shit from people who thought the part should have gone to someone in a wheelchair. And I said, Sean Penn had the great line, which is, in the future, the only people who can play Hamlet are actual princes of
Danish
Denmark.
princes, yeah. Yeah, it's true. Listen, I went to University at Albany, and I had just put out the book that you were kind enough to put a quote to, Bob Honey, who just did stuff,
Very
my first
book.
novel, and I was traveling with the book, doing readings and discussions with moderators at other writers at bookstores and so on, trying to hustle the thing, and I went up to the University in Albany, where Harvey Milk had gone to school, and the book was being taught by one of the literary professors there.
Wow.
And that meant that I had a lot of people in that audience when I came out who actually had read it. And where I felt when I read criticisms of it, which were great, most, I could tell that most of them had not actually read it through. And fair enough. But what happened is that because I had mentioned the Me Too movement in a skeptical way, as a movement at large, and
Right.
what was happening in terms of the trending movement of it,
Right.
I questioned that in the book. And so I had protesters outside the auditorium at the university. And some of those protesters found their way into the auditorium. Most of them were outside with the banners, fuck Sean Penn or whatever it was. And I was in the wings, and they had told me, there's so-and-so, the head of the university department here is going to introduce you and then moderate the conversation. And I'm waiting in the wings in this auditorium, and I'm hearing the introduction. And at some point, close to saying, and now, ladies and gentlemen, Sean Penn, and I come out, they mentioned the movie Milk.
Yeah.
Got a big applause. And I was listening to that applause, and I was realizing the contradiction in what was happening outside with the protesters and a few inside. And when I came out, I think the first thing I said, which was, I think, a fair observation, is, were that film made today, I couldn't play that part.
Right.
And the same people who 2 minutes before they were applauding Milk were thinking, fuck him about me too. Suddenly we're hardwired into an acceptance.
And also institutions are becoming the opposite of what they're supposed to be. Colleges are supposed to be about scholars, and free speech and opening your mind. And now it's about, you can't say this, how dare you?
Not only that, worse than that, but you can't teach at this high a level, how dare you? Hence the NYU organic science professor who was fired because too many of the kids' parents wrote complaining letters, you're making the course too hard. And these are the people who are going to be our professional, our health professionals.
Oh no, colleges have been taken over by ideologues.
Yeah.
There is something going on here, to come full circle here, that is very reminiscent of Mao's Cultural Revolution in 1966. with DEI officers as the Red Guard. People like that. Now, of course, there is a place for DEI officers, and there should be some. Like, I think Michigan State has 140. That's a lot of witches to be hunting.
Yeah, it's a lot of witches. It's a big investment in the hunting of witches.
It's a well said, exactly. So, that doesn't make me a conservative to point that out. I just always want to keep it real.
Listen, and we've talked about this before. Whenever people applaud their socialism, when they use that word, I want to fight them, because we know from every experiment around the world of socialism, it doesn't work.
Oh.
Capitalism is not sustainable. There are, if your grandmother is alone at home and someone breaks in, she calls 911. She doesn't have to put her credit card down when the police show up. That's socialism also.
Yeah.
But don't call it that. Well, shut the fuck up and just communicate policies to people without relying on the trending titles and all the bullshit that so many of the...
Yes, there is a perfectly rational... It would take 2 seconds to explain socialism in the rational way, which is America is already quasi-socialist, as it should be.
As it should be.
As every Western democracy is, and most other countries in the world that know how to do it right. It's not just Western countries now. But yes, there is places where the military is socialism.
This is going to be the battle of the next month with the debt ceiling.
Yeah, of
this
course.
is going to be the battle.
What is bigger socialism than making tanks we don't need? It's because it's a jobs program in districts that make tanks, and they want to keep making them even if the Pentagon says we have enough already. That could not be more socialistic. So, and then we have a lot of excess social. What was the bailout of the pandemic? $6 trillion, really and most of it was stolen. We know that. That's a little hard to take. So, yeah, we have socialism already. I've always thought we should have socialized medicine in more along the
areas that we can. By the way, these are sellable stories,
right?
If you don't call them socialism,
or at least a public option. It's just, how the Republicans fought that one, I never understood, because you're supposed to be for freedom, options. We're not even it's not mandatory. No, just a option. It's in the word, public option. It's just an option, and of course they won that battle. But
to be in a time where Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney are an anchor into civility.
Well, I come on. That I think is the wrong fucking attitude. We admire them because there was a bridge too far for them, which was, no, you can do everything, but you can't try to say an election didn't happen the way it did. You can't. That's the way to banana Republic. Those are what I call good as it gets Republicans. I have Bill Barr on the show Friday night. He's my lead guest. A lot of people won't like me just even platforming him. But what fucking good does it do to just say that these people are irredeemable or deplorable or they can't be reached? Or, I could argue with Bill Barr about a million things, and I'm going to hold his feet to the fire about one thing that always fucking stuck in my craw.
What is that?
That is, when the Mueller report came out, he gave a summary, which was unnecessary because he was provided one by Mueller, didn't want to use that. Provided his own and said Trump was cleared of obstruction of justice when Mueller plainly said, we're not clearing him. We're just saying he's not guilty.
So he made an informational mistake for sure there.
An informational mistake, a purpose, anyway.
But the thing that people don't talk about enough when it comes to the Mueller report and Mueller, I clearly, and I understand this, most people don't understand the culture of service-oriented people, especially when it comes to military, chain of command. Those are things that we are benefiting from in a great way as a better way to organize it than other ways that we've come up with so far. So you have a guy like Robert Mueller, who is an extraordinary civil servant, both in his military history and his post-military history, who recognizes the chain of command. And most people, I'm sure as we sit here tonight, still don't understand probably what I think is the most important thing that Mueller was never going to tell us. He said from his level that there was no way to indict a sitting president. That was not law. That was Justice Department policy.
I know. I made the same point. I know. Yeah. Right. But Bill Barr. Anyway, the point is, I could argue about a million things. Yes, I'm going to bring this up because I'm sorry, but he's got to answer for Santino on the Causeway. Other than that, what point is there to just get into like this, I hate you, I can mention all these things I hate about you, versus like, came to do the show, he, you know, in other words, I have to accept that there is a certain conservative personality. I think the personality comes before the politics. You're just born with a certain chip, or it has to do with where you're from, but sometimes it's just a chip in your brain, and you're a conservative. He's Bill Barr. He's a conservative. That's him. Pipe and slippers, turkey dinner, Christian. Come on, it's just a type. Stop being angry that that's the type. And of course, a certain sort of politics comes out of that type.
Also, if your agenda goes into the abstracted rather than the tangible, literal, obvious, if it's, I want tomorrow better for everybody, I don't know how we get there, then the starting point.
They would say they do.
But the starting point is the same starting point in a relationship between two people.
Interesting, yes.
Being right is overrated.
Right.
Well, it's like, how do we move the ball forward enough to get a first down? Okay. That's what we should be doing in everything that we're doing. We do an investment in citizens politically.
You're a marrier. So you think being right is overrated is, you know, because when you're married, you have to give up.
I've earned that view. I've earned that view. because I've always been right, though.
I know, and I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that point. I'm just saying when you're in a marriage, you have to pretend that you're not right, even when you think you're right, because it's about keeping the peace. Am I right?
When you're on planet Earth, you've got to at least accept that you might not be right.
Oh, of course.
And you have to also,
I couldn't agree more.
Also consider the possibility that everybody else is wrong. You've got to do both. That's what makes us human.
Okay.
That's our thumbs.
Okay. So you just made my case for me about the thousands and thousands and thousands of doctors who dissent from your point of view about the vaccines, but I really didn't mean to bring it back to that.
Okay, honey, but can I rub your back?
Well, but I mean, I've always thought that was your romantic Irish soul, that you are a soulmate finder. You want to, the problem is we all evolve so much in life that the soulmate changes.
Yeah, and, I feel a certain kind, on our level, a certain soulmateness that we saw the first time we met each other. It's been consistent. And I look back on relationships, there's a lot of ego that gets in the way of things and all of that, but there is a lesson to be seen if one looks for it, which is that whether we're talking about our worst enemies or our best friends, the best thing we can do for our children is finding commonality. And every time we try to do that, every time we do that aggressively, we get such a reward.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I don't always think of you that way, because maybe it's from Team America World Police.
Which, by the way, I never saw that. But it's my son's favorite movie.
It's almost my favorite movie. And those guys, the South Park guys, I don't really know them.
I met those guys, and I ended up writing a letter to one of them that he exploited. He used it publicly when they were putting out Team America. But my problem was something he had said. One of the two of them had said something to discourage voting if you were not informed. And I thought, you know, people are informed in different ways, and you get. I don't like the idea of discouraging voting, and I went against him in that. Wrote him this letter, and it timed out with his release of this film. I didn't even know that I was a part of the subject matter.
Boy, that was stupid.
But what I
you
will
walked
say
into that.
is that I never still don't get South Park's butt.
I don't either. I don't either.
But what I will say,
many people love it,
is that
smart people,
those guys who created the Book of Mormon,
yes, that's great too,
are fucking genius.
Well, if you like that,
I went twice.
I
went twice.
Team America.
Team America
is talk about you couldn't make it today. I mean, and that's why it's so great. And you know, it's right. It's post 9/11, so it's about, you know, I won't spoil it, but that's another movie to put on your list. I can't believe you.
Well, you know, this thing I recently
Don't you watch every movie?
I don't.
I guess movie stars don't watch movies.
You know, I've gotten.
I think it's, you know, it's like me listening to comedy. It's like it's like a busman's holiday.
No, I think you originally fall in love with movies, and you go and like. I love the period that I had where I loved every movie in one way or another. Like the movie was always exciting to me.
Yeah.
And you know, over time you accumulate a taste of certain kinds of things that you particularly celebrate, but you know, you take the guilty pleasures. I think for me, going to a movie theater is a public place that represents my professional life. So I'm going to go somewhere where there are likely people who are going to recognize me because they're interested in movies.
Right.
And that's its own downside.
Right.
I think Bob Dylan said the greatest thing about, like the worst thing about fame is people reminding you who you are. And so you become allergic to that. And then when certain genres take over the space of what, like I always refer to it as the girl I fell in love with, was mostly alone, not on a date, not with a buddy, but when I would go in the afternoon to Westwood and go into one of those theaters and see the movie I wanted to see. It's like the first time you tasted something. It was alone.
I did the same thing in New York.
It was the best.
When I first moved to New York, right out of college, and my first apartment was on 8th Avenue above a bus stop. Probably made me very sick later in life. 8th Avenue, bus stop, and I would wake up at like 1:30 in the afternoon, take a piss. I'd walk down Broadway. Every theater was playing in Times Square. This was like 1980. I didn't have to look in the paper. Anything I wanted to see was...
I was at that, in 1980, I was living at 48th between 8th and 9th. Right there. And I tell this story sometimes. I remember that it was the first time I ever lived in a storied building. Because I had been running around as an acting student and couch surfing and doing what you do.
Because LA's better.
But I couldn't get a job in LA. So I went to New York, tried to work in the theater there. I was doing equity waiver theater stuff. I went to New York with a buddy of mine. We paid $375 down, which included the security deposit on an apartment that was a one-room thing. I remember one night he called me from a payphone, because that's how you called somebody.
Yep.
And we had put in a hard line in our, with our two mattresses on the floor in this apartment. And I was going to bed because I didn't have the money to do anything else. And I knew how to go to sleep at that time, a little bit at night. And the phone rang and it was him, and he was coming in from Queens on the E train. And he was a little drunk, and he was trying to get his old girlfriend back and heartbroken, and he begged me to rally and meet him at this bar 2 blocks away from the hotel. We'd been living in the apartment for about 5-6 days at that point, and we had not taken the garbage out. And I didn't know where you take the garbage out in a high-rise building. And so I get dressed and rally to go meet him. He's dealing with his heartbreak. And it was always interesting at that time to walk down like that because you know, it's like all the prostitutes, you know, want a date, and you felt like you were a living taxi driver or something.
Right. Yes.
And we had this out-of-work actor bar down the road, and we'll meet you there. And so I got dressed and I get in the elevator. And next to me is the most exotic, beautiful woman I've ever seen. I'm growing up as a surfer in Malibu, and I'm looking at a woman who doesn't look like the Barbies I'm used to. She looks like when I went to the dentist office and saw the cover of Vogue.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, wow, this is New York. And I've got to figure out a line. And I'm shy, but I can't, I won't forgive myself to not try. And I said, I pressed, she had pressed the lobby, and they were coming down. We had another 12 floors to go down. And the elevator starts going down, and I got to come up with something. And my line was, do you know where the garbage goes in this building?
Did you have it with you?
And her response was, yeah, you take it right down to... It was a man. And I'm hearing Lou Reed in my head, take a walk on the wild side. Yeah.
I take that story to mean a long overdue celebration of us being whatever we want to be. A woman, a man looks like a woman, a fish, a tree. Yeah. You know that the kids in school can now identify as a tree? I'm not kidding.
I'm not joking. Listen, I identify as a person who calls Donald Trump she or her. I identify as a hot dog bun who wants its own bathrooms. We got to get a hold of there's a silliness to the woke culture that's gotten out of hand.
Not to load a burden on your shoulders, but honestly, sweetheart, it is really more incumbent on someone like you. All the liberals who are privately tell me we agree on all this stuff, who are known liberals. The reason why you're in Team America, World Police, is because you're a big star. It was Alec Baldwin was the head of the Film Actors Guild, or FAG. That's what I'm just quoting the movie.
Well, they're pretty irreverent. That's okay. I mean,
the reason it was you and Matt Damon, it was the stars of the day. Just like it was the stars of the day in 1985.
It was the low-hanging fruit is the argument I'd made while I was punching Matt in the face.
What I'm saying is you have the cachet and the credibility as such a revolutionary that, when you say it, it means a lot more than when I say it, because they know I don't pull those punches on either side, but it's a lot of this nonsense will only stop when the enablers allow it to stop. And
listen, I remember when you and I had dinner that night at that tower, and the ladies from the magazine came by and we were talking. And, you've been, I don't want to name people on the thing, but it was a big magazine publisher, editor, fashion involved person. And they came to the table briefly, and it was at the moment that a young woman, I can't remember what the thing was, but she had been canceled for texts.
High school?
In high school.
Probably Alexi McCammon.
Yes.
She was a rising star on MSNBC.
Yes, and then slaughtered. Right. And you sit there, so listen, I mean, it's flattering when you say, someone like you can say that. I don't know that. I don't have any grasp of a credibility. I know that I have people who alternately agree with me.
Can I give you an analogous example, I think?
Sure.
Woody Allen. Almost everybody turned their back because he is accused, although not proven to be, and many of us think it's ludicrous that he actually is this thing, a pedophile who started at the age of 57. Okay. But most actors just completely caved.
They caved. It was such an...
Scarlett Johansson, God bless her, was like, fuck you all.
But wait.
I'll work with him whenever I want to, and, we live...
Scarlett Johansson,
so
uniquely...
Love her for that.
Is... intuitively on the right side of almost everything.
Oh, good.
She's a very unique character.
Oh, good.
And someone I have...
Well, that certainly would indicate that to me.
I have deep respect for her. And she also took very strong positions, and during the Me Too period. I think she alone bridged reality. If she alone was the voice, we would have been in a better position.
Yeah, you sound like.
This whole. We all use the words pendulum swing, and we're hopeful that there's and I'm certain that there's a pendulum swing.
I don't know.
I don't know when it's going to happen.
Everybody I know, like in your age range, is constantly complaining to me, like I'm the confessor, about how much they can't stand their uber woke children who are like teenagers or early 20s, and they're like, they just can't, they just want to slap them.
Well, and to that I say, deep breath.
Yeah.
Because they'll get over it.
You think?
Well, here's what I used to say to myself, is take some stride, some fundamentalist, militant, person in that period where there were the real things, likely the Harvey thing and this thing and that thing. The Woody thing never made sense to me because I've never heard watching forensic files of a pedophile who only did it once. So it just never made any sense to me.
Really? In a house full of adults.
Yeah. It was
in the middle of a custody fight. It's
in the middle of a custody fight with somebody who adopted every child they could find,
right?
And whose brother was doing time for a pedophile.
Whose brother exactly. And from a woman who had a giant motivation to be revengeful. No denying the
vengeful.
Yes, no denying
beyond comprehension.
Right. But and exonerated by two different, investigations. That's all I'm saying is Hollywood is a bunch of fucking cowards. And I'll tell you something else because I do have to wrap this up.
And because I have to pee.
And I have to pee too. But I am telling you, Sean, I swear to God. My belief about people in show business, I love them, I love show business. I'm so glad I got to be in show business. But when people ask me, I'll say it straight up. The default setting for anyone in show business is a complete idiot. Most people are complete idiots.
Well,
especially actors. Wait.
Since you have the ability to cut, you can edit this and put it in this one, and just share this with you before we go pee. We'll cross swords.
No.
So, there was a meeting. I was driving to the Mojave Desert from Northern California with my son. We had our dirt bikes strapped in the back of my El Camino. We were going to stop for the evening in LA at the Four Seasons.
Oh.
He was going to go with a friend of mine to a movie. I was going to go to a meeting down the street from the Four Seasons at L'Hermitage Hotel. And the meeting were the people who were being called traitors at the time. Those who were very vocal about the invasion of Iraq on the basis of weapons of mass destruction and all that. And I don't know who's comfortable with me naming them, so it doesn't matter. But you can go back and Google the group who were on the billboards on Sunset as traitors and so on. And Gore Vidal was going to hold court with that group and have a little group thing. And I got my son with my buddy, and they were about to go off to the movies. I came downstairs at the Four Seasons, and I ran into Michael Moore. And I was going to this thing, and I thought, are you going to this thing you didn't know about? I said, what are you doing? He said, I was going to take a walk. I said, have you ever met Gore Vidal? I had not met Gore Vidal at that point, but I wanted to. And he said, no. I said, come with me. And we went, it was a group of about 15 who were just sharing their positions and their experience and their thoughts on where we were headed. I don't know that it had a particular agenda. It was more of a commiseration that somebody had organized, because you could count on the fingers of the people that were standing up. And Michael, as a latecomer, stood quiet for most of it. At the end of it, because he was at the Four Seasons, because the next night was the Academy Award, And everyone knew, Vegas knew, he was going to win for the Columbine movie. But having made the Columbine movie, having that as a focal point of his public discourse, things had accelerated in Iraq, and he had shit to say about it.
I remember.
So he came to this thing and he said, and he opened it up at the end of the conversation. He said, I have a speech written. If I win for tomorrow, which people say I'm going to. But does anybody have any input as to anything I might add to it? And I will say, my idea, and Michael can confirm this, and I think we both wish he'd done it, was to just thank the Academy, acknowledge those who'd suffered in Columbine and were suffering, and those who were lost, and be grateful that this group was going to add impact to that conversation. Well, one last thing. Could everyone in this room for time and perpetuity who believes the U.S. should invade Iraq, please stand up for the cameras for the 300 million viewers.
I mean, they booed him as it was.
That would have been an indictment that would have been done us a lot.
Well, he's the last guy you can say he doesn't have enough balls, because that guy's got huge balls.
He's fantastic.
That's an intimidating room. But you remember when you were with him in Hawaii? When I brought Michael to Hawaii?
Yeah, when we did the totem,
Yeah, wasn't that, and he was also on stage with you.
Yeah. No, he's a
I know you got to pee. I just want to tell you, like, I started to say this, like, most people at showbiz are idiots. But there is, I would also say about showbiz is, the creme de la creme is creme. Like the directors who last, and the Spielbergs, they're there for a reason. It wasn't, anybody can get lucky for 2 years or 5 years.
Yeah.
But the careers that last, like yours, that have this kind of endurance over decades, it's because the cream does rise to the top. I mean, this town is full of bullshit, but it adores talent, and it does elevate it, usually correctly. I mean, I can certainly find some casting choices I didn't agree with, but mostly they find, that's their job, to find the good people, which is why it's a shame I couldn't see Dustin Hoffman equivalent in Rain Man today.
Yeah.
But I just want to wrap up by saying, like, this, yes, it's mostly idiots, but the people who are smart in this business, like you, and you could be not the A-listing swashbuckler that you are, and you would be just as interesting to talk to. Your head is just a font of knowledge, and
I'm just not going to interrupt that thought and say thank you.
All right. Well, I thank you, and I thank you for doing this. I'm like, sure.